What's up, dudes, Sudettes, and those in between? My name is Bob, and today I'm going to apologize for the asinine topic and possibly some spicy language. I, I'm sorry, but if you have a headline for an article that says, "Invented for Nazi infantrymen, further developed by the US military, the AR-15 was a Texas school shooter's weapon of choice," you're going to piss some people off. You're going to piss some people off who know about firearms, who know about the AR-15 and its history, and they know about the Nazi firearms and their history and where they came from. Because that's a blatantly false statement about a very recent tragedy that has no reason to be said. Now, I'm not calling for this Washington Post senior editor to be censored or anything. I just want to point out the fact that they're an idiot, so we can all just point and laugh. Anyway, and before I actually dive into the meat and potatoes of this, the article itself is over 4 years old. And this is just sort of a personal note. I can understand if other people won't be as offended as I am, but it just seems lazy and insulting that whenever a tragedy happens, can't write an article to get your feelings out and deal with the pain that this tragedy causes. Because most people would write an article and say, these are the changes that I would want to make to our society. I want to make these law changes, whatever. And I can understand that. I can respect that. We're all looking to prevent school shootings, right? But don't recycle garbage from 4 years ago. At least come up with something, dare I say, new. Um, anyway. But I get the feeling they chose this article specifically for that headline because there's a major, major leap of logic here that I have to call out, and that's the part that really pisses me off. In the article itself, it says that the AR and AR-15 does not stand for assault rifle, which, golf clap. Okay, welcome to the 21st century where everyone who knows what a firearm is has known that for 50 fucking years. Congrats, right? But they go, while the AR doesn't stand for assault rifle, the concept of an assault rifle was invented by the Nazis for the Nazis, and yes, that statement does check out. Specifically, that statement checks out with the STG-44 or MP-44, the Sturmgewehr. That was the world's basically the first successful assault rifle. It fired an intermediate cartridge, the 8mm short, or 8mm Kurs, uh, as some people know it. And it was a select fire rifle that was just overall, it was an improvement onto what else was on the battlefield at the time. So let's get into what else was on the battlefield at the time, and what is an intermediate cartridge and all of that, right? So one of the best known examples of a firearm that was on the battlefield is this. This is a this is a Soviet Union Mosin Nagant. It was not Russia at that point. Apologies, Russia's on the brain due to current events. We live in a wonderful world. But anyway, see, it's a very long rifle. It's covered in wood. It's steel. This is a man's rifle, and it fires the 7.62 by 54R cartridge. This is a full power rifle round. And that's just sort of a designator we use for this type of ammunition. There's more than one full power round. We'll get into that, right? But one of the great things about a rifle like this is this rifle wasn't just made for World War II and fought on those lines or whatever. This rifle specifically had already been fighting for decades for the Soviets. The Mosin had more blood on its hands, before World War II than I think World War II gave it. But I digress. Getting back to the topic, one of the good things about this rifle is you could put this in the hands of a relatively inexperienced conscript with a full power rifle round and say, hey, dumbass, you're here to protect this depot or wherever you're protect, right? Or you can give 500 of these to 500 conscripts with minimal training, say, go take that hill. And even if they don't take the hill and they kill half the people on it, still got a lot of use out of a bolt-action rifle, which is kind of becoming obsolete during this war. In fact, it could be argued in the close quarters nature of World War II, and especially in World War I, weapons like this, and by the way, if you know what this is because of that symbol right there, feel free to leave a comment. I know, I know, but closest thing to the real thing. So you could argue that a pistol, an auto-loading pistol, or even a revolver, is much better than a Mosin Nagant or a Springfield, because with a pistol you can go bang, 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 and hit different targets each time, whereas a bolt-action rifle, bang, 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 right? And sure, whatever you hit is going down with a bolt action, but even if you have to hit somebody twice with a pistol, that's more effective, like in the long term, from a time spent viewpoint, you know? So a whole bunch of these bolt-action rifles were on the field, and Germany gets this idea that maybe we need something that isn't quite as powerful as this, because this is, like I said, slightly overkill for an enemy soldier, but you can push this out to 5, 6, 700 yards, you know? You could take longer shots with this, and you could build a rifle that's relatively accurate around this round. And that's how it still has some use. However, as war develops and as it changes, the ability to fight at close quarters starts moving away from melee weapons and pistols to proper primary weapons, which is how the assault rifle came to be. Now, in 1943, the Soviet leadership were actually presented with one of the Sturmgewehrs, one of the earlier models, and the demonstration was, here are its capabilities, here's its strong points, its weak points. Can we either copy this or make our own version of it or make something similar? That way we're on the same level as, as our enemy on the field of battle. Because don't get me wrong, the Soviets had things like the PPD-40, the Papasha 41, and they did have good close-range weapons, but the problem with those were they were either incredibly high rate of fire shooting. I want to say it was the PPD had a fire rate of 800 to 1,000 rounds per minute, something like that. So sure, it's absolutely devastating, but reload, reload, not super effective unless you put some training into it, make people, do short controlled bursts, which is what our doctrine is today, either single or short controlled bursts. That's sort of the evolution of military doctrine, right? So they get this Sturmgewehr, they start developing their own thing, and from the 7.62 by 54R cartridge, they come up with the 7.62 by 39. And as an example of a full power rifle round, and as an example of an intermediate rifle round, they use the same type of bullet. They're both 30 caliber, obviously more powerful, more range, but lighter, easier to carry, can carry more of it. And honestly, you don't need to be shooting like a sniper rifle can, like this can. So this does the job. And ultimately that develops into the SKS and the AK-47. This guy right here. Although this isn't an AK-47, civilian version, whatever. Actually, yeah. Anyway, so this ultimately comes of the STG-44 assault rifle concept. Now, that is the whole basis of this article and its headline. And I can understand that when you're taking a look at it from a Russian standpoint, because it happened during the war. They used the STG-44 literally as inspiration for a concept like this. They didn't look at the STG-44 and be like, we want to build this. They just wanted something with the capability that the STG-44, and this is what happened to come out of it. Now let's flip over to the American side. Talking about some of the American guns they had, like I said, the Springfield 1903, that was a 30-06 round, which is this guy right here. For comparison, 7.62 by 54R, the Russians, 30-06, the Americans, right? But that was their bolt-action rifle. They also had the Thompson submachine gun. They ended up working on the grease gun, which is a very, very cheap option. They could very quickly produce them. In fact, a lot of grease guns and Thompsons were actually leased to the Russians to use because they didn't have enough guns. Fun fact there. But they get through the war, and then in 1954, Armalite, the company, is founded in California. And during the time of peace that we were in, Armalite decides, hey, we, being the U.S. government, the U.S. military, is still using a bunch of outdated things like Springfields and Thompsons and whatnot, so they wanted to build their own rifle and sell to the military as sort of their cash cow product, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they're doing business to make money, so I get it. But they ended up coming out with the AR-10 in the late 50s. Now, the AR-10 fired a .308 Winchester round, which would eventually become 7.62 by 51 NATO, 7.62 NATO, and the AR-10 fired it. And it was a good round, or it was a good rifle, a good round, reliable. They presented it to the Army, and the Army just made a whole bunch of excuses. Well, no, we're looking at this M14 rifle. We're looking at this thing. We like these certain aspects of the AR-10, but not really. And they kind of passed on it and they pushed on it. And they kept telling Armalite, go back to the drawing board, give us something different. So eventually, the Army tells Armalite, we like the rifle, but we don't really like the round because we already have a different gun with that round in mind, and there's no sense in having two rifles shooting the same round for the same purpose. But the rifles are different. There's no point in that. So they're like, why don't you scale it down to something a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact, and bring it to us then. Eugene Stoner and Armalite were like, challenge accepted. They scaled it down to the relatively new 223 Remington round, brought it before U.S. Army, said, hey, this is the AR-15. Oh, okay. They looked at it, smaller round. They get something like this. They're like, okay, it's a handy rifle. They had some good things to say about it, but this is also during development when they haven't really ironed out all the kinks as to exactly like bullet weight, how much powder is going into each round, and all that was supposed to be used for the AR-15. It hadn't really been ironed out. So the Army comes back and says, nah, fix it. Here are X number of problems, fix it. Okay. So Armalite goes back and they start fixing all these problems that the Army just keeps insisting this gun has. Finally, they come back with an improved version of the AR-15. They're like, hey, Army, what about this one? Well, the Army rejects it, but then the Air Force decides we're going to pick up some of those. And when the Air Force picked them up and started trying them and using them, and they had a lot of success in their test, the Army was like, whoa, maybe we should actually look at this AR-15 thing a little bit more seriously. So when they look at the AR-15 a little bit more seriously, they actually accept it, and they designated the M16 rifle. Now, I'm not going to get into all the M16 teething troubles because there was a very significant ammo change that caused a lot of problems in Vietnam, caused a whole bunch of problems, and it looked like the AR-15 was about to get scrapped. Army's like, we don't really want these. So why did I tell that story? Well, both the STG-44 and the AK were developed sort of out of necessity, where those countries realized we have good products, but with how war is changing, we need something new to meet the new challenges of war. And it was developed as such. Sure, the AK came out after the war was already done, but it was being developed by Mikhail Kalashnikov when he was injured from the war. So it comes from a wartime setting. The AR-15, however, is a derivative of an entirely different gun that never saw any sort of interaction with the Nazis because the Nazis were largely gone by the time the AR-10 was even thought of. So, which just bothers me. I can understand the mental gymnastics to get from AR-15 assault rifle concept was developed by the Nazis, except you picked the wrong fucking gun. You, if anything, you should have said the AK-47 was invented for Nazi infantrymen. But I digress. If you liked the little bit of history that I gave, and if you want to appreciate me not completely blowing up and screaming my face off, go ahead and hit the like down there. Um, Sometimes the stupidity of people just irks me, and yeah. Anyway, my final thoughts on this whole thing is if you're going to politicize an event, at least have your facts straight. And I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I can do some research. I can double check, here's some correct dates, here's some correct timelines, and sure, having visual aids is nice, but it doesn't take a gun nut to know about guns. Anyway, with everything that's going on in the world, I genuinely, heartfelt, wish people peace. I There's enough evil in the world, and the internet is probably the cause of a bunch of it, so try not to spread more. My name is Bob, and I will see you guys in the next one. Out.